So I'm Zack Hudgins. Thank you very much for coming today. And you all know Steve Bergquist and Bob Hasegawa. I want to thank Barnaby for letting us have our meeting here. In the past, we've also hosted meetings and town hall meetings in the Liquor Control Board. With liquor privatization, that facility is no longer a public facility. But it's good to have folks come to a place that they don't normally come. I mean, this is an integral part of our public dollars, of our infrastructure, of what government does. And we sort of know it exists, but it's nice when you're sitting at the desk. So make sure, if you can, take a tour, see what the facility is all about, and tell your friends and family that something like this exists. You know, as we battle in Olympia about the role of government and how to pay for government, it's good to see things that we don't often see. I mean, we'll see a school, we see a road. We don't often see these kind of facilities that are very important when we need them. And if you don't have them, then you notice right away when you need them. We're going to start with, the plan for today is to start with a short video that we did, just because we thought we could. And because we love seeing ourselves on the giant screens. And then we're going to take a couple of minutes each to sort of just do a brief overview, and then we'll go for the questions. There's cards on all the desks, so please fill out your card with your question, and we'll start working through it. My legislative assistant is Doug Hanma, so he's helped organize. I want to thank Doug. Also, since the last time he's been here, he's gotten engaged, and so those people clapping are all the happily married people. So he's got some wedding planning this afternoon, and so it's nice that he's here helping out on a Saturday. One of our interns, Cynthia's in the back. She's also been helping. She's been helping during the session. She helped today as well. So Cynthia, and then I'll let Bob and Steve introduce their folks as well. Do you want to
quick words, and then we'll start the video. Appreciate everybody coming out today on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. It's good to have these things in February because there is less incentive to be outside, isn't there? My legislative aide is Sid Locke, right over there. Sid lives down in Olympia, but makes the trek up. It's very, very nice that he's willing to do that, and the time and work they put in to get this prepared for us is pretty immense. Also, my intern for the session is Joe Kane. He's at UW Bothell right now, and I really appreciate his help so far. Thank you.
Hi, and I'd like to introduce my legislative assistant, Chio Sater, in the corner over there. And Marvin, spacing on your last name. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Comes with getting old, I guess. My back's been bothering, so I'm going to be sitting too. But so Marvin is my intern for this session, and also has been helping immensely during the session to coordinate all the activities at the office. So thanks for that. And I guess you know how to click this thing. Hi, I'm Bob Hasegawa, State Senator for the 11th Legislative District.
State Representative Steve Bergquist. I'm a fourth generation 11th District. I am. Social studies teacher.
I'm Zack Hudgins.
You guys just want to stay on the screen.
With my wife and my one child, Sebastian.
I ran because I think I really reflect the values of our community. My goal is to have a better education for our kids, create jobs in our community, and have great outcomes for all of our citizens.
And I ran for office because I thought that Washington State needed somebody focused on the jobs and the economy and how to create those jobs, especially somebody that came from the high-tech industry and knew what the new economy was like.
I kind of fell into this job actually through a lifelong history of fighting for social justice.
This is quite a difficult job. There's a lot of pressures coming from every direction. I know you can never make everyone happy, but my goal is just work really hard and be as productive as I can for our district.
I spent a lot of time in the legislature working on issues that are not that sexy, that aren't that big, but I want to make government work better. And so that's why I work on these issues about governance. And I also work on big issues that can really change people's lives.
Like it was Frederick Douglass that said, there can be no progress without struggle. And so we're always trying to progress our society, so we're always in that constant state of improving ourselves. I really love this job because I can empathize with the day-to-day struggles that constituents are having, and I can be that voice in the middle of a fight to try to improve lives for all of our constituents.
I love this job because it presents many challenges. No matter how much you get done now, there's always something else that needs to get done to improve upon or change something that was enacted.
I love this job because it really is about helping people. And it's about making government work better to help people. There's a great quote about how democracy is the worst system imaginable until you compare it to all the others. I think every day in Olympia we see that. It's a frustrating system. It's not always fun. It's not always fair.
Even though it is supposed to be a part-time job, it is definitely a full-time gig.
But in the end, we get great results. More people are involved. More people give their say-so. More eyeballs to look at every piece of legislation so that we get good outcomes. And so we really are helping our state.
It's a tireless job, but it's very rewarding, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I wish everybody would just come to Olympia, I guess, and experience the Capitol building. It's just so majestic, and when you're here, you get the sense of the gravitas of the decisions that we're making, and how it's all about us pulling all of our efforts together to be greater than we are right now.
We can't do our jobs in Olympia without your input. And it's really important to us to hear from you. And so I very much appreciate getting your cards and your letters and meeting you in person and facilitating a dialogue about what we should be doing in Olympia and how we should be helping our communities.
Yep, that's your tax dollars, probably. So I guess we're just going to each take about 5 minutes to talk about our view of the legislative session so far and where we think we're going coming out. And for my part, the session, I should probably give you a little bit of background history. If you don't know the composition of the legislature right now, we have a Democratic-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate. So being in the minority in the Senate, I've told my Democratic colleagues in the Senate, actually, that I've been a minority my whole life, so I know how to fight from a minority position. So it has been frustrating. There have been, the politics has been unprecedented, really. It seems like as a legislature, or at least as a Senate, we're getting farther apart on things instead of getting closer and closer together. So on many of the major issues like education, the Democratic philosophy, if I could be allowed to speak for our caucus, is more, we've been implementing reforms because we're always trying to get better as an education system. But we already know what the real solution is. We've got to put more money into the system so that we can implement these reforms. The Republican philosophy is reforms before revenue. So they want to keep implementing and keep changing the system before we've even had a chance to implement the other reforms that we've been trying to put into place over the past years. So it's been a constant tension along that line on education. Transportation is another issue where the Republicans are saying reform before revenue. And while we don't necessarily oppose reform, it's where are you going to get the revenue to build infrastructure that we want for our transportation system. So the Republican proposal has been to put together an 11.5 cent a gallon gas tax. But the problem with that is, in return, the reforms that they want are just, in my view, unconscionable, because they want to divert the sales tax, which goes to fund education, and put it back into transportation. And they have no plan to replace that loss of revenue, that loss of revenue in education. So over the years, you may be familiar, have you heard of the McCleary decision? Yeah. There's a Supreme Court decision that says we are underfunding basic education by close to $5 billion. So we have been instructed by by the state Supreme Court, we need to increase funding for basic education by $5 billion in the next couple of biennia. We'll never get to that goal if we keep diverting money out of our education budget to fund things like transportation. So those kinds of reforms are just, the Democrats are saying we cannot, if you want reforms, we can do some reforms. We want transparency in our transportation system, transparency in the management of our system and how we're building things, but we can't do it at the expense of education. We're talking about, another big issue right now is we're talking about how to implement Initiative 502, recreational marijuana. So there's a huge struggle on how we're going to figure out creating a system from basically nothing to the first system in the country on implementing marijuana. I've not got involved with the details of how we're going to merge our current medical marijuana system into our recreational marijuana system that the voters just approved. What I've been focusing on is the financial infrastructure on how we're going to implement Initiative 502, because currently, right now, medical marijuana dispensaries or recreational marijuana distributors and retailers are all totally unbanked. So we're talking about creating a $1 billion marketplace out there, potentially $1 billion marketplace with hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue that is totally unbanked, i.e. it's going to be a cash-based system. That's just an invitation to armed robbery and organized crime and all kinds of bad things that can happen. So I've been focusing on trying to create that financial infrastructure to implement Initiative 502. My staff has also been tracking the things of importance to you all. When you contact my office, they log if you're pro or con or how you feel about the different issues. And I should have brought the paper up. Just give me a second. So the most important issue by far has been government health care. And it is literally unanimous, 340 contacts supporting the Washington State healthcare implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, if you will. Further down the list was environmental protection, 144 all pro. There's not a single person against that. Gun control was a little bit more mixed, but by far our constituents in the 11th district do want some form of gun control legislation to move forward by, I would say, 4-1 in favor of that. So educator COLA is a very important thing for our district. We realize that we have to pay our teachers fairly. We have not given them a raise since, I think, 2008. And the voters approved Initiative 732, which is supposed to give the educators a COLA. And we've been, as a legislature, not giving it to them every year because we've been trying to save money since the recession started. So that's sort of my brief where we're from. I think where we're going now, we are just past the halfway point in the session. So coming out of the session, I expect that we will have a supplemental budget, which is not what anybody in this room may be wanting to see, in the sense that we're hoping to put a lot more money and using some of our revenue projected increases to improving benefits and our social safety net. But coming into the session, the Republicans were saying they don't want to see any kind of a supplemental budget. They don't want to spend any of our increased revenue projections to put it towards anything. They want to put it towards our ending fund balance so that we'll keep a cushion in case our revenue projections are too high. So that's another fundamental tension that we've got. The transportation budget, I don't expect we'll have a transportation budget coming out of this session, because this is The 11th district is the most important, strategically important transportation district in the state, because we have everything from the Port of Seattle to the railroad intermodal transload facilities to King County Airport, which is the air freight hub for the entire Pacific Northwest. So we are strategically the most important freight mobility district in the state. Yet we're not going to see any money coming into our district, I don't believe, because of this tension that I mentioned earlier in the philosophies around how the transportation system should be, how we're going to budget for that. Capital budget-wise, that's what we use to build schools and public facilities and other things of public purpose. We may have a capital budget. I think that we will probably have something, but it's not going to be anywhere near what we need to maintain our public infrastructure for the growing needs of our state. So I'm not optimistic that we're going to come out of this session with anything more than just a little bit of an operating budget. So that's my projections. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that we do a lot better. But fundamentally, Republicans have said that their view of government is that they don't want to kill government, they just want to shrink it down to such an extent that they can just drown it in the bathtub. That's a quote. So you could see that there's a fundamental tension, and as a result, because the people are divided in the state, we have a divided legislature. So until the people all get together and decide which future we want to see for our country and our state, I think that we're going to continue to have a divided legislature. So we're going to have to make a decision as a people of the state. What do we want for the future of our state? That's my quick report. I think I used my 5 minutes. So, who's next?
Good.
Quick question. Is there anywhere in the nation where the Democrats and Republicans are working together?
Anywhere in the nation where Democrats and Republicans are working together. The Republican Party is going through a very difficult time right now internally, because the Republican Party that we knew when we were growing up doesn't exist anymore. So they've got a far right-wing faction, the Tea Party faction, that is basically splitting their party. So they've got to maintain their cohesiveness, and so they're getting drugged further and further to the right, which takes, in some cases, it's been dragging the Democrats further and further to the right too, because they're trying to get along. So unless, my view of it is, I heard an old labor leader named Walter Reuther speak. You know Walter Reuther? Him and Victor Reuther were the founders of the UAW, United Auto Workers Union, probably one of the most militant workers unions back in the day in the 30s. They had huge strikes to organize the industry. I personally heard Walter Reuther say that, give this description that, politicians are like a piece of paper standing on a bookshelf. The corporations are always pushing, and you expect the corporations to always push. The people have to push back, otherwise the politician will flop over. So it's this constant tension. If you don't push back, you get pushed over. So to say that they can all get, there's 90% of the stuff we do get together on, but it's the 10% of the stuff that where it goes towards our fundamental principles that we have to keep fighting. And those fundamental principles are things like taxation. I view taxes as the dues we pay to live in a civilized society. The Republicans, that's coming from an old union member who's used to paying dues, right, to build power. That's what we need to do, is build power as a people to fight back against the corporations. So, is there any place in the country where they're getting along? It's hard to say, you know, that's a broad statement. You have to just look at the issues and just say, are they fighting for the people or aren't they fighting for the people?
Bob?
Can we let everybody talk
No,
before we
but
get into questions?
I was just gonna answer a question real quick. Where we are working, and Zach, stand up and take a big bow. We got signed the DREAM Act in this city. And that is under the leadership of Zack Hudgins that really helped to push that through. And I have this daughter that worked on it when she was at Bellevue and worked with it when she was at Central. She said to say thank you to all three of you, but this is a major thing in this state where we did work together for the benefit of the future of everybody in this state. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. So before we get started with my piece here, I wanted to make sure everybody realized they have those question cards. If you have one ready, just hold it up and everybody will come around picking those up from you. And one special group of people I need to introduce before we get too far. This is my wife Avanti and our 4-month-old Anjali. I kind of like them. I really appreciate everybody coming in today. I want to, before I get too deep into it, let you know that when you come down to visit in Olympia, I definitely remember. Also, I've had some rolling town halls, I think one in June, one in August, and one in November. That people like John Worthington, I remember you came to one of those town halls. Laura from Jay's Automotive wanted to come to one of those town halls. Let me know. She couldn't make it. I actually went and visited her at her place of business and discussed things there. So I'm pretty flexible, and I think all of us are. If you ever really want to talk to us, we're more than willing to make the time to do that, to hear your issues. I try to make my constituents, that's you all, my number one priority, unless the family takes priority. Right. And something I wanted to talk about were kind of some of the accomplishments I think that I've been working on over the last 2 years. My big priority as a high school social studies teacher, I teach at Lindbergh High School. 10 years in the Renton School District, is to get more kids actively involved in our government process, more civically engaged. As we're going to the more college and career ready standards, there's also a civics readiness standard that we're implementing in the social studies. And getting kids to be engaged is part of a bill that I'm trying to pass called Motor Voter. Who here got their driver's license when they were 16 or 17? Who would, if given the opportunity at that spot, at that time, click the yes button if it said, would you like to pre-register to vote? That's my bill. Right now, that's the most popular way people register to vote. When you're 18 and up, for all 18-plus-year-old people, that is the most popular way for voter registration to occur. But for 16 and 17-year-olds, when they go get their license, right now in our state, they don't have the opportunity. I think 12 other states already do this. It's a pretty easy fix. King County, for example, has a process in place. Right now, you can register to vote online when you're 17, and they'll keep track of you until the first time you turn 18. So that's a bill that I worked on last year, passed out of the House, died in the Senate. After it died, I started learning really what it means to be a legislator. To, okay, figure out ways to get it done, maybe without an arduous process. And so I found an old law. Does anybody remember 1923? Okay. We passed in our state Temperance and Good Citizenship Day. Every January 16th, our schools must observe Temperance and Good Citizenship. Did you know that? I had no idea. I'm a social studies teacher. No idea. So digging through the laws, and it actually requires that the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction annually provide curriculum for that day. And so I started thinking about, okay, how can I make this work? I was able to talk to the first thing I did was say, well, if the superintendent's in charge of this, I would like to talk to his office and just figure out if there's any interest in making something happen with this. And kind of cool. This was the first time I figured out, wow, having this title of state representative actually might mean a little bit. When I asked to meet with someone from his staff, not someone from his staff, but the superintendent of public instruction was in my office the next day. And he was very excited to hear my idea about Temperance and Good Citizenship Day. And we got into the budget with his help, a proviso, it didn't cost any money. They said they could do it within their own funds they already have. That basically it was already required that every student get civic education on January 16th, so a reiteration of that. But that every eligible student that's eligible to register to vote be given that opportunity on January 16th. So every 17-year-old, every senior basically, because you have to be 18, as long as you're 18 before the following November, you can register to vote online. And so by January 16th, almost every high school senior is in that category. So if they're eligible to register to vote, they should be given that opportunity from now on. I kind of encourage your support in letting school districts know about this. This was the first year, and the message wasn't quite out there yet. So we need some people to kind of get that message out to the schools, especially the high schools where our kids can register to vote. Sorry I took up a lot of time on that, but it was kind of a cool opportunity for me to kind of see how the process worked. And I think it's something we can really use going forward to get more kids civically engaged. Imagine sitting in high school social studies class already being pre-registered to vote. Would that mean a little bit more when you're talking about elections or other issues? So I'm working on that. We had a hearing yesterday, or day before, on that same bill. It's got a little warmer response. The Secretary of State, who's a Republican, Kim Wyman, was against it before, and now she's at least silent on it. She's no longer against it. So we're getting there. I'm working. But I could use your support on it. Another bill that I'm working on this year is about paraeducators. Anybody know what a paraeducator is or does? They spend a lot of time one-on-one with our kids. They work hand-in-hand with the teacher, but they don't quite have the standards, the training that they need maybe sometimes to do the work in the right way. And they came and asked me for that help. So I've had over 100 paraeducators in my offices talking to me. I've gone out to Tahoma School District, to Renton School District, been able to talk to different paraeducators and find out how we can help them with more opportunities. They don't get paid very well, but some of them want to become teachers. And if they're working in the classroom, it should probably be an easier opportunity to then become a teacher, yet there's no real pathway right now for that. And so this would create a work group that would establish standards. So for paraeducators, like they have to have some kind of training before they're given contact time with the kids, which they're asking for. And also, if they'd like to become a teacher, we make it easier, less burdensome for them. So that's a bill that came out unanimously in the House and the Senate. Now we're seeing which version goes forward, but it looks pretty promising, and that's a fun thing for me this year. I think there's a little transportation budget issue. I don't know if anybody knows that, but Bob was mentioning a little bit. I'm on the Transportation Committee, the Education Committee, and the Government Operations and Elections Committee. So as the transportation member of this trio, I am kind of upset that we didn't get something out. The House passed a budget last year that had a great package for our district and for our state. The Senate did not act on that. They came out with a proposal this year, the Senate did, that just doesn't meet the standards that we need. And as a response to that, King County's kind of given up on this package coming out. So they have a levy set up for April to save our metro funding. I'm not, who's aware of that? Okay. I think it's really important. Our area, our district is pretty underserved when it comes to transportation, public transportation. So it'd be real important to get out and vote on that and show your support for that issue. It actually will help in the negotiation process for a transportation package down the road if we can get that one passed this year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Zach. Thank you.
Is the mic on?
Yeah.
I'd first like to introduce, or at least have the other elected officials in the room stand up. I see a couple of school board members. Dave, say just you can wave, say hi. Mary, others, Dick, and Dan. We got local jurisdictions. It's nice being in the legislature for a number of reasons. The least of which is not that we also get to tell other jurisdictions what to do, which really upsets them sometimes. But it's nice having the other electeds here so they can push back on us and make sure we're doing the right thing. My wife and son couldn't be here today. Sebastian's 2.5, and that means that he's sick about every 2 weeks. And so he's at daycare, and so he's at home right now with a runny nose. I thought that I enjoy the questions. We've gotten a bunch of them. A bunch of questions about education, transportation, taxes. I want to give you a quick overview of where we are in session, and then we can dive right into the questions. This is the short session, and I apologize if this is a little bit of a civic lesson. It's good to remind folks of how we're set up. We're a citizen legislature. We're part-time. We try and do our best. We've had over 1,800 bills just in the House introduced this year. There's some overlap with the Senate, of course. But it's an enormous amount of work, and it's an enormous amount of effort that's put in by basically all of us citizen legislatures. So I come out of the high-tech industry. I've worked at United Way of King County, at Highline Community College. You know, Steve's a teacher. Bob has worked in a number of capacities with Teamsters and operating engineers and others. This year we've had over 1,800 bills in the House, and they are on everything imaginable. And we all come back from our districts with these ideas. I've had 4, 5, 7 bills from constituents. Most of those died in committee at some point. I got one of them that came from some arts community folks in South Park who put on a little art show. Some folks might know it as Lucha Libre. And they're being regulated by the Department of Licensing under the boxing standards. And so this bill has gotten to the Senate. I mention that because it's not just platitudes when we say we need to hear from you. This is how Olympia works. We take your ideas and we take them to Olympia and we see if we can find agreement. And generally, on everything, not everything, not immediately. That's not to rain on the parade or anything. It's just to simply say that we passed about 330 bills out of the House this year, out of about 1,800 that were introduced. And the Senate, I think, did about 120 bills out of the Senate this year. So that's the nature of the process, is to kill ideas and to get a lot of ideas on it, eyeballs on it, and to bring people towards a consensus. If everybody is a little bit unhappy, then it's generally seen as a success. Weird way of measuring people, but that is the way we measure it. Now, if we get everybody happy, that's also a good way. And occasionally, you do have to pick one side over another and move forward even without full agreement. That doesn't usually work because we usually end up coming back the next year, that sort of thing. So in a 2-year term, we start with a 105-day session, and I'm sure you all remember that it took us 6 months last year to find agreement, mostly on the budget. That was the longest session that anybody could remember. It was almost, I think, the second longest in state's history, and it came right down to shutting the government down or not, and that's when we got agreement. And it was a big fight over a lot of things. That budget lasts 2 years. So technically, we don't have to do a new budget this year. We don't have to do a new transportation budget, that sort of thing, because of what we passed last year. This year is a 60-day session, and it is called supplemental budget. It is not supposed to be new big changes. It usually adjusts for different pieces. The governor's budget, it was the first one that he wrote in full. He had an entire year to write it, and to the different agency heads that he included. And it had a big problem in it for us in the House, and then it took $400 million out of MOTCA and used to help with the operating budget. That's the Model Toxics Control Account, and it's the closest thing we've got to a tax on oil, and it was put in place in, I believe, 1988 by voters. And so that made it difficult for us to pass a budget. We balance our budgets, unlike Washington, D.C. We're required to. And so that $400 million has been a little bit of what we've been sorting out in the supplemental budget about whether to do anything. The short session, and with the elections looming in the fall, we don't often talk about the elections, but with the elections clearly on everybody's horizon, lot of the discussion in Olympia has been about what positions do we take, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, to create contrast with the other side so that people know where we stand. And the Republicans are doing the same thing, the Democrats are doing the same thing. In some ways, it's easy to see the contrast between the Republican-controlled Senate and the democratically controlled House. And so there's some of that. Some would call it posturing, some would call it high water mark, setting the standard. A lot of things that we're not going to agree on also just die. And so if we know of a coalition or a stakeholder that doesn't like a policy, then it just doesn't make it out of committee, it doesn't progress at all. I mention this because we are now after cutoff. So we've got these very strict deadlines. There's a deadline for getting bills out of committee, there's a deadline for getting them out of the fiscal committee, there's a deadline for getting them out of the House of Origin. And we've passed that House of Origin cutoff. So where nothing is ever really dead until sine die, things do die and the bills aren't going to progress any further. The fights also kind of roll because if I start with 7 bills and I've only got 1, or if I have none, then the fight moves to the next thing. That's sort of some perspective on where we are. We are now starting to hear bills from the other House. So we're starting to hear Senate bills this week in the House, and the Senate's starting to hear our bills at home. Not as many, of course, because we only got 100. It's a big difference. Last Thursday, I think I heard 25 bills in my committee and exec out 23. And it moves very quickly at that cutoff period. Things also die a lot. So that's kind of where we are in this process. So as we talk about where things are in the process, some of this has already happened or is about to happen. The next big step is a budget. We don't know if we're going to have a budget or not. We're working towards that. The Senate is supposed to go first this year. They're supposed to release their budget this week, and then usually within a day or two, they'll release our budget. Most of those decisions are already made. Not all of them, but most of them are made. And most of us don't know all of those decisions. There's so many people involved in those decisions that everybody knows a few pieces. So I can tell you what I know, but I don't know everything that's in the budget. It will become public, and that's when the amending process and the hearing process and everything will start going. I will mention the DREAM Act, since Jerry stole my thunder a little bit.
Just adding to your accolades.
The DREAM Act passed last year with a 77 to 23 vote out of the House. Passed this year with 71 to 20 votes out of the House again. It was a big bipartisan bill, and it passed this year on the very first day of session, which nobody can remember a bill ever passing on the first day of session. I first introduced this bill in 2007, and it didn't go anywhere. It got a hearing in committee because the chair was nice, and it sort of got introduced and didn't go anywhere for many years until this session. Went to the Republican-controlled Senate, and all the indications were that it was not going to move. I sat down with Republican Senator Barbara Bailey. She did not move the bill last year. She told me in Oak Harbor, a coffee shop, she had no intentions of moving the bill. But this is part of the process. People were involved. People talked to the senators. They talked to the Senate on both sides. I mean, that's where the fight went because we moved it out the first day. And it came out of the Senate with a 35 to 10 vote. And it's great to work on a piece of legislation where you can bring people together. And the governor's supposed to sign it this week. He's got 5 days. And so they're shooting for Wednesday. And it's really exciting. I mean, we did it on the first day in the House. The first day we could consider Senate bills. We did it on the first day of Senate bills. And it's about creating opportunity. Not everybody's happy. That's why there are no votes. And it also shows there's a good, vibrant discussion. But we're trying to help online students get access to financial aid. We're helping military folks get access to financial aid. And these kids that have grown up in our communities that we know a lot of them exist in Renton and live in Tukwila as well in South Seattle. These kids may not have papers when they decide to come to the U.S., but they've done well, contributed to our communities, and now this gives them the opportunity to compete for financial aid. So it's a big win for these students in creating opportunity, and I was lucky enough to have my name on the bill. So that's kind of fun. I'm also working on a couple other bills, the Lucha Libre bill, kind of a breakfast after the bell bill. Help kids get access to breakfast after school starts. Hungry kids can't learn. All the teachers have been telling me that. I'm sure of it. And with that, I think we've got some questions, and I think Steve's got the cards. But thank you again for coming out today. I really appreciate it. Keep calling us. There's an 800 number. You should all have our cards. There's email. Answer your email. And grab us in the community. I know that a number of you, Steve, has been down to Olympia a number of times this year, so has Juliana. grab us and talk to us. It's fun seeing so many together in one place, intimidating, but let's go ahead and dive into the questions. So Steve, go ahead.
I'll take a few. All right, I took a few transportation and education questions since those are my committees. The first one was how concerned are you about the cost overruns and taxpayer risks from the Seattle Tunnel project? Good question. One of the things I like about this project is it was a design-build project. So for most of the projects we've done in the past, the Washington State Department of Transportation designs it, and then the contractor builds it. So if there's a problem with the design or a flaw in the tunnel digging machine, then who would be on the hook? The state. In this case, it's a design build, so the contractor designed and built is building the project. Theoretically, the cost overruns would fall onto them. We also have something written in on the cost overruns falling to Seattle. I don't know that that's going to be able to be, I don't think we'll be able to hold them to that. But the hope is, and what we're hearing, is the design build process, it should be that overruns would be on the contractor, but it remains to be seen. We need some more time. Do you have a quick question?
Yeah, real quick. I'm really concerned that the contractor could very well go bankrupt, and then if that happens, then what happens to it?
So I think we need to wait and see what these cost overruns really are. We don't really know that yet. If it's a large, they do have some money set aside in the contingency fund for this type of thing, like tunnel digging stops building, and they're within the time frame of the warranty on the machine. So there's a couple things that are going well for us on that. Education-wise, really quickly on the paraeducator bill, how will paraeducators pay for additional schooling? So the hope is they wouldn't, like a paraeducator that would like to become a teacher, right now has to pay for all their schooling. Well, but we would hope that we could find some way of giving them some credit for what they're doing right now. So it would actually lessen their costs that they currently be paying to do something. Also, this is a work group that paraeducators are on. So paraeducators help to make these decisions. So if they decide they want to spend a lot more money on education, I'd be surprised if that's what they can do. But it's up to them to kind of decide what the best path is for the paraeducators. This is an easy one. What is the current status of educators' COLAs? So teachers, I'm not sure if you know or not, we passed as a state the statewide COLA for teachers, cost of living adjusted every year for teachers. That was over a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago. And so every year, teachers were getting a raise based on the cost of living. So when inflation goes up, you get a raise. The last 6 years now, the legislature has said, we don't want to give you that raise, and so they haven't. And I think when you look at the numbers, teachers, because of that, lost out on like 15% of their income over that time period. And there's a big push this year to bring the COLA back a year earlier than maybe was planned. I think we need to wait for the budget process to play out, so I'm hopeful that Ross Hunter will have it in his budget. The House budget and the Senate budget, that's where it's going to lie. If there's money in the budget for it, I think there's going to be a big push and a heavy pressure to get a COLA for our teachers. And
Retroactive, hopefully?
doubtful that would be retroactive. Unless you have an extra $1 billion in your pocket. Okay, good. There's one more. Can you speak to the updating of Washington State's high school graduation requirements? I'm not sure if you all know, the state requirement is for 20 credits right now to graduate. Most districts have 22 at a minimum to graduate, but the state is trying to move to a 24 credits to graduate system, including an extra math and an extra science. Some districts already have some of those in place, but there's a lot of support in doing that. I think I have some trepidation still just with the amount of money it will cost to create extra classrooms to deal with these issues, and the large class sizes and the lack of counselors to maybe help kids get to graduation. So I'm hoping that we can the earliest this will be implemented is for the class of 2019, so I think 7th graders. They're 7th graders now. So we have a little bit of time to figure this out, but it's coming soon, and I'm trying to do the best I can to get us prepared for that and to be in a spot where we're ready to help all those kids through to graduate with 24 credits. Because I think it's something we're going to. We have to be ready for it.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. One of them was handed to me over here. One of them circuited the entire process and handed it directly to me. And then my legislative aide handed me one. So this question is, why did Senator Hasegawa vote against engross second substitute Senate Bill 6552, student hours and CTE equivalencies? I presume that's CTE, it says CTF, but is that the bill that you're talking about, the 24 hours? Okay, the reason I voted against it, and I actually posted my floor speech that I made opposing this bill on my webpage, so you can hear my full explanation there, but very briefly, and I'm told that I'm too long-winded on my answers, so I gotta speed it up. So, right now, this would impose a 24-hour graduation requirement, as Representative Bergquist said. My view is that right now, we have kids who are coming from disadvantaged communities or backgrounds or children of color who are failing to graduate at astonishing rates, even at the 20 credit requirement. So if we can't even get those disadvantaged communities, those students over the 20 hour, why are we going to raise it to 24? Until we can adequately fund basic education and get kids to graduation under current standards, I don't think that we should be looking at washing out even greater numbers of disadvantaged students. That's why I was opposed to that bill. Let me see. Please explain the Senate's good faith defense in Senate Bill 5158. I don't recall who. Let me show you a little thingy here. This is a crutch that we use, and where is this bill? So if you go to ledge.wa.gov, okay, I'm going to show, this is a little educational piece for y'all. So, yeah, just I can get to it here. So if you go into this left column, you see a thing called Bill Information, okay? Click on that. By the way, this is the main legislative webpage. You can get to anywhere in the legislature's whatever through this page. So you go right, I clicked on Bill Information, you click on Search Bill Number, and let's search 5158. Oops, my bad. Okay, 51. See, that's why I could never do my old calendar. If you ever want to schedule anything with me, be sure and contact Sheila because I will invariably screw it up. So, okay. Creating a good faith defense for certain minimum wage and overtime compensation. Oh, that's the minimum wage. Okay. I believe I also posted my speech against this bill on my webpage too, so you can hear my explanation on it. There's a Senate companion here, and if you, this is called the bill history page, so it will tell you everything Bill has done. And by the way, see this little orange thing here? If you click on that, you can sign up to get an email whenever this bill does anything. If it gets assigned to a committee, if it gets passed out of committee, you will be sent a notification. So you can track any bill that you're interested in through this, and they will notify you when something is happening with that bill. So if it's scheduled for a hearing, and you want to go down to Olympia and testify on a bill, that'll let you know when that bill is being heard. Okay, so if you go down here, you can see it was pretty much a party line vote in the Senate, 25 to 23. And if you click on view roll calls, you can see exactly how everybody voted. So you can see these are all, this was a party line vote. And here I am. This bill, and you can click on that Senate bill report, And what this bill does is allow employers to not have to pay back wages if they feel like they shorted their employee in good faith. To me, the law is the law. If you owe wages, you ought to pay those wages if you're due. That's why it was a party line vote. It's workers' rights versus corporate rights. It kind of boils down to that. Paid sick leave, this is a House Bill 1313, so I can't speak to that because I haven't seen the bill yet. It hasn't come over from the House yet. The last one is kind of a toss-up. I mean, it's addressed specifically to me, but it says, how could your constituents help you the most? What a great question. I'm a community organizer, and it's all about building power in the community. So the way that you can help me as the representative of our community is to build power for our voice in our communities. And that extends beyond the 11th district. If you've got friends, relatives, acquaintances, co-workers who live in outlying districts, talk to them. Talk to them about these bills that you're concerned about and why you think that they're important and how you think, convince them that they should talk to their legislators. And that's how we start building power. Okay, I'm trying to keep my answers short. So. Zach, back to the main webpage. Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
I'll let you do it.
We're at 1 o'clock, so if anybody needs to go, you can go. If you'd like to stay, you're welcome to stay. Right. Sorry, the Greenwich Mean thing. Military time, or 1,400 hours is what that clock says. One of the benefits of being the senior member of the delegation is I get to go pick all the easy questions. So I picked out marijuana, hemp, drones, climate change, abortion, gay and lesbian rights, and gas tax. Sorry, Bob's going to the back of the room. And Steve's hiding behind his baby. I will start by saying that I hope to agree with as many constituents as I can, as often as I can. I think that's how we get elected, and that's how we stay in touch with our community. That's not always the case, and so if we are going to disagree, I hope that you understand kind of how I came to what my thought process was, how I came to some conclusion, how I voted for things. I am not always right. That is easy to learn as soon as you get elected and show up in Olympia. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of people that will tell you exactly where you're wrong every time you say something dumb or sponsor the wrong bill or whatever it is. And when it comes down to it, we have to hit a button, and it's red or green, and we got to take a stand, and it's very public, and then we hear from folks that disagree with us. So a number of these issues are very controversial. I apologize if we see things differently. I'm happy to explain more about why. I'm sure Steve and Bob feel the same way. These issues also are usually incredibly complex, and so a few minutes up here is not going to answer all of them. We could spend an hour face-to-face and probably wouldn't cover all the ground. So with that in mind, I thought I would kind of go through a lightning round since we're out of time. We didn't plan it to be out of time, but I thought for the general audience, you could sort of understand some of these other issues. So the question is, why did you vote for 2149 without a proper fiscal note, without a small business impact study? Why didn't legislators protect 502 business models so law enforcement did not have to increase? Next one also is, well, all but 3 Democrats in the House voted to end medical marijuana. How can we support the Democrats when they don't support us? Will the Senate Democrats do the same? Medical marijuana has been an issue since the recreational marijuana issue passed the voters. It is not under the same regulation. It probably shouldn't be because it's medical. But how, if, why we should regulate medical marijuana has been a lot of discussion in Olympia this year and very passionate. The patients that benefit from medical marijuana do not want to come into the same regulatory structure as recreational, and a number of folks that see recreational as legitimizing recreational use will no longer be abusing the process of the medical marijuana side. The bill that was passed out is still controversial. There are a number of folks here that are not happy that I voted for it. I think that it was a compromise to move us towards a more standardized regulatory system so that patients can keep access to the medicines and recreational folks will fall under the 502 regimen. This is a brand new thing, and it is not going to go smoothly. I'll set the standard there. And there's going to be a lot of hard feelings, but passionate feelings on all sides of the issue. Colorado is making a move on this. It's a shift that hasn't happened in 80 years in the country, and this will continue to evolve. So I think that the legislation helped bring us towards what we need to do, which is better regulation in this brand new marketplace. And we are going to be open to continuing to change. Question about hemp legislation. There's a bill to authorize, legalize, standardize industrial hemp. Came through my committee. It died last year. This year I worked with the most conservative Republicans in the House, Matt Shea, Jason Overstreet, and David Taylor, to move the bill out of my committee. It's got a very large fiscal note and create a big seed bank for the Department of Agriculture. I didn't see the reason why we keep we outlaw industrial hemp, but nobody wants to smoke when we're legalizing recreational medical. Drones also has been a big issue this year. There's also a lot of hard feelings, warm feelings. Nobody feels warm and fuzzy about some of these issues. There are a number of bills. The ones that Representative Morris drafted went through about 5, 6, 7 drafts. And so just keeping up with that debate and extra sensory devices and government regulation, what's good government use, like fighting forest fires, and what's not, tracking all of us. We passed some legislation out of the House as well. We think that it to use a great cliche in Olympia, it puts good signboards around the issue. And again, I think that as this technology moves forward, we'll see what's a good use and what's not a good use. Drones, hemp, marijuana. Mental illness. The cost of not treating mental illness exceeds the cost of treating mental illness. Mental illness is something that was not even considered much as a big issue when I first got to the legislature. We talked about how healthcare stopped at the neck, so it didn't include dental or hearing or eyeglasses and mental health. We passed mental health parity. We really changed that discussion, and we have just changed the discussion about how do we help folks to stay compensated, and you give them a little bit of help, and then you don't have to catch them before they hit bottom, and you don't have to pick them up after they hit bottom. It's a huge cost to all of us, to their families, to them, to their employers, and to the community at large. So it's hard to measure the negative. It's hard to put enough money into things we care about, and that includes everything from education and early education and pre-K to helping the mentally ill. And we do still see stories in the paper about why it's important to help people stay compensated. Catholics were down in Olympia yesterday, 550 folks representing a number of different parishes, and this was one of their top issues as well. And it's something that a number of communities are talking about now. What's the Washington legislature doing about climate change? We've all decided to walk to work from here. And we've all decided to shut up more often because of the hot air. The House Democrats have been leaders on climate change. We still have some climate deniers that we work with, climate change deniers that we work with. And a couple of specifics are around the Renewable Portfolio Standard bill. And we passed a bill out that looks out to when that ends, when we hit all of our marks in 2020 and say, okay, what's next? Let's start talking about that. We've got a number of work groups around climate change as well in Washington State. There's a number of sites that we have around power production and coal power production in our state, and where are we getting that and that sort of thing as well. So it helps having a governor where this is his top priority, so we're able to line up with some of that. That fits in with everything else going on, and so you're not going to hear us touting 1 or 2 bills. If we could pass a bill and solve climate change, then I'm sure that I would have done that already. There's a couple other, so I'll keep going through the easy ones. Mark Elias has a bill about sexual orientation, and Cody's Reproductive Parity Act. There's a couple of other questions about religious freedom and conscientious objection around elective abortions and having businesses support gay weddings. The Elias actually bill is an easy one. It passed out of the House with a bipartisan support. There's this therapy that some folks use on people to change them from being gay to not gay. And it is often being done by people with no certification and no training. So the bill says you shouldn't do this to some of these kids. You shouldn't do it to any kids under 18. And we have Republicans support the bill because they heard the testimony about it. So that actually has very little to do with the issue of being gay or not gay. It has to do with how people treat minors and whether minors have any control over that. I suspect that the bill does okay in the Senate as well. It certainly helps that the prime sponsor has moved over to the Senate. Law of the land now is around protection, equal rights around civil rights and marriage equality in our state. I've continued to talk to a number of folks about not being a party against conscience, but you can have a conscience and you can object to something, but you have to pay a cost. And the example I give is sort of Vietnam War. You don't have to go fight in Vietnam, but there's a cost and you go to jail. And so you can not do something, but there's a cost. And if society has decided that this is the standard now, then you don't have to abide by that standard, but you pay the cost. And so I think that's where I would come down on, if your business doesn't want to give flowers to a gay wedding, well, first, they probably don't want you involved in their wedding. Maybe they don't have a choice. If they don't have a choice, then I think that there's a cost to not adhering to the law of the land. These bills are passed by overwhelming majorities in our communities. We are not other states, and you see the turn of history on this issue as an example. That does not mean that people do not feel very strongly on the other side of it. And they do, and I hear from them, and I do not dismiss those very strong, passionate feelings. The law of the land is equal protection, and it is about civil rights protection, and it is about legalization of abortion in our state and our nation. And again, that doesn't mean you have to agree with these things, but you do have to agree with the law of the land. The RPA, in some ways, it is an insurance bill, and we don't have out-and-out fights about abortion in Washington State and the legislature. All of these issues also decided by the voters and not by guys like me in dark suits. These were decided by the voters on a number of occasions, and so I am very reluctant, since they elect me, to tell voters that they're doing things wrong. The RPA is an insurance cleanup bill around the Affordable Care Act. It takes a current practice and makes sure it's protected. For those of you that don't like the RPA, the Reproductive Parity Act, it's not going to pass, so you can all calm down a little bit because of the Senate. The House has passed it a number of times. I support it. It simply says if you provide maternity care, then you also have to provide family planning and abortion services. I think that my concern about it is it's an insurance bill, and I will never use maternity care. My wife did, but that's part of insurance. It's something that you hope you don't have to use, and you pay for things that you hope you might not need. And I think that's the subtlety on the issue. Is it's about making sure that insurance is covering what people want. And so there are a number of businesses and individuals that have written to me and said, why do I have to pay for abortion? And you're not paying for abortion. You're paying for the services you get in that coverage, in that insurance plan. And that's what you want for your employees. Just because other services are available doesn't mean you're paying for those. I mean, it's easy to make that argument. It's not a crazy argument, but it is not the way I read that law, not the way I see current practice. And again, these will be issues that will continue to unfold as we do something that hasn't ever been done in this country, which is the Affordable Care Act and giving access to more people around health insurance. It's a big deal. There are a lot of fights about it nationally, locally. I don't think that this fight is as big as it has been made into, or maybe it shouldn't be. That's not to say that abortion is not a big fight, because this bill is an insurance coverage bill. It's a cleanup around practice versus current statute. And so it's interesting watching how these things take on new life. Because we don't have a big fight about guns, every time guns gets mentioned, it becomes a big fight about guns. This is an insurance bill. We don't have fights about abortion. It has become a big fight about abortion. And I hope that doesn't parse it out or diminish people's feelings at all. These are you know, being real heavy doesn't get guys elected, right? We want to be happy and we want to give you good news. But you want to know that we're talking about these things, and it would be easy for us to skip over some of these questions. Public pensions. The question here is, what can we do to control costs of public? Our public pensions are better funded than almost everybody in the state, and there are a number of states across the country whose pensions, like Illinois, are not only in the tank, but incredibly expensive, rich benefits. Someone asked me what pension plan I'm in. I'm in PERS 3. Steve's a teacher. We've got other teachers in the legislature that are in the teacher's pension. We've got legislators that are in the TIA-CREF and the firefighter's pension. So anything we do to pensions, my pension is no more rich than anybody else that works for the state. And these pensions are not as exorbitant as other folks make them out to be. Now, with the Boeing vote around machinists and a shift to 401k, there's a continuing discussion in Olympia about shifting to a 401k model. And I don't think that's going anywhere, but that is part of this whole discussion about somebody doesn't like that idea. Gas tax. You know, the gas tax is an issue because you get to see it at the pump. The House has passed out a transportation package worth, I don't want to know what it's worth. It's been a year, but Steve, what was the gas tax increase in the House? 10 cents?
10.5 in the House, 11.5 in the Senate.
So, and we haven't raised the gas tax in over 10 years. It was 13 years before that. Every time you see an orange cone on the side of the road, that's a job that helps out the folks in the neighborhood. And I try and talk, the gas tax is you see it at the pump, right? You see how much you're paying. And at the same time, gas goes up and down. I drive back and forth to Olympia. I can take every gas station between here and Olympia, and I can tell you most of their prices. And I can tell you that there's more than 10-cent deviation between here and Olympia. That's 52 miles from my house down there. I think the oil companies do very well for themselves. It's okay to make a profit, but they do very well. And having 10 cents go to jobs in our community and create a better infrastructure, making sure some of that goes towards transit is not an unreasonable ask. We haven't done that in 10 years. Again, people hate paying taxes. I hate paying taxes, but I see the benefit, and the benefit here is jobs in our community and better services. With that fun downer note, unless you'd like to, we'll be around for a while, and there are tours. Barnaby will offer tours. You've all got our cards, and a lot of you write to me. That's how I know you. Okay, so I see in the community, and so many of you know I write back, right? Anybody got a note for me? Okay. Oh, good. All my friends are in the front. The angry people back there. So I read everything that comes in, and it is an enormous amount of work, and I love it because it keeps me in tune with what people are feeling, which is how I'll take the hard questions because you want these questions answered. I'm happy to answer other questions. It's an 800 number. It's an email. If you put your address on there, I will send you a note back. Doug spends hours printing these out for me. I carry around them everywhere. Other members notice. If you ask another member of the legislature, ask them if I'm writing back. This is something I'm known for because it's important to me. And so write to me if you don't get me today. And I want to thank you all for coming today and for listening to us talk about these things. Would you like to add anything, Steve? Bob?
No.
Anything? Well, with that, we will go ahead and end the official program, and we will mill around and come grab us and talk to us more. Or you go out there. Thank you very much.
The milk.